Hey guys, it's me, Seanie B, and today we're going to talk about everything that happened in episode 4 of season 6 called The Substitute. And it was a great episode. This week's episode had a lot of things to cover for me to go over, so I'm going to focus more on the secrets and theories and ideas rather than the actual recap. Okay, so this episode's name is The Substitute, and unlike most titles, this could be alluding to many things. Like, for instance, it could be referring to Locke as a substitute teacher, as we'll see a little bit later. And maybe it refers to Locke's dead body on Nigeria Flight 316 being a substitute for Christian's dead body on Flight Oceanic 815. Maybe it refers to the choice the candidates have to make whether or not they want to become Jacob's substitute, as we'll see at the end of this episode. Or maybe it's referring to Locke's body being a substitute for the Nemesis from his previous form. Who knows? But before we start, Fast Reflex Award time.
And boom goes the dynamite.
Alright, here's the top 5 winners for each part from last week. Again, tell me when the image is and what the image is for this week's parts, and if you're the top 5, you win. And again, I'm going to be breaking this up into 2 parts like I did the past couple weeks. The first part being everything that happens in Locke's Flash Sideways, and the second part being that everything that happens on the island. So let's get it on. We start off with Locke, who falls out of his car. Then Helen comes to get him and gives her dirty man a bath. We also see here that Helen makes Locke choose between a light and dark piece of cloth. I think it's funny that Locke chose the dark cloth. Helen says that she wants to have a quick Vegas wedding and that she wants to invite her parents and his father too, Anthony Cooper, which I'll talk about in just a bit. So Locke goes to work and his boss Randy gets mad that he lied about going to the business conference and fires him. You're fired! We can also see this picture of his dad with him, signifying he still likes his father, and meaning Cooper probably wasn't the one to push him out of the window and paralyze him. That means that in this alternate timeline, as we've seen before, things still ultimately happen similarly, but just in a much different way. On a side note, this picture is actually a still from the episode Deus Ex Machina. Guess that means Locke saw that episode. Another funny thing here, if you go back and watch this scene again, look at the part where we can see Locke's wristwatch. Time isn't moving. It's just stuck at 11:05 and 15 seconds. Weird. He rolls on outside and tries to get in his car, but Hurley's Hummer is right next to Locke's car. And I know I'm not the only one that was wondering this, but how in the world did Hurley get out of his car? And thanks to Raga for bringing this up to me, but Hurley really is telling the truth on the plane to Sawyer when he says, "I'm the luckiest guy in the world." Was it just a coincidence that Locke's wheelchair ramp barely missed his car? I don't think so. I don't think even a meteor could hit his car at this point. Hurley comes by, tells Locke he owns the company, and likes Locke, so tells him that he can have a new, better job. So he goes to the temp agency where Lynn Karnoff asks him some ridiculous questions about what kind of animal he thinks he is, and stuff like that. I was hoping he'd say a polar bear. Remember in the original timeline, Lynn was actually a fortune teller who tells Hurley that the numbers are cursed and will result in death. So Rose, the supervisor, comes out and convinces Locke not to be a construction worker and claims that she has terminal cancer. A little later in this Flash Sideways, John and Helen talk, and Locke says that he has accepted his limitations. He also says there's not going to be a miracle because there's no such thing as miracles. And during this scene, we see Helen is wearing a shirt with Chinese characters on it. The right side here translates to awakening soul, and the left side here translates to revealing the spirit. And correct me if I'm not right, by the way. We also see Locke's alarm clock, which is the exact same one as Desmond's in the Flashes Before Your Eyes episode. We later see Locke working as a substitute high school teacher. He works as a PE teacher and a science teacher. Then later goes to the teacher's lounge where he sees Ben Linus, who's a history teacher, and Locke has a look of, wait, how do I know you? Also, we can see a banner in the background here that reads, "Live in the present, plan for the future." Very fitting, don't you think? On a side note, Locke asked for Earl Grey tea here, which is probably a shout out to Patrick Stewart, who in Star Trek loves Earl Grey tea. And as we know, the producers mention Star Trek throughout the entire series. They love it. Also, he plays Professor X in the X-Men movies, who's a bald teacher in a wheelchair, just like Locke. This flash sideways shows Locke as more a man of science now, whereas Jack is more a man of faith, kind of reversed from what they were before. 2 episodes ago, Jack tells us that nothing is irreversible, which is faith-based. In this episode, Locke says that he doesn't think he can fix, there's no such thing as miracles, he doesn't believe in miracles, and he also is a science teacher. Now again, we still don't know if the flash sideways is a reset or not, but I don't think it is. However, like I talked about a couple episodes ago, the bomb could have detonated and it could have not have detonated at the same time, like in the Schrodinger's cat paradox I talked about. That means the 2 timelines could exist simultaneously. Alright, that's everything from the flash sideways. Now I'm going to be talking about everything that happened on the island. And I'm going to break this part up into 2 parts as well. The first part being with Ben and Ilana, the burial of real Locke, and the second part being with the Nemesis and everything that happened with him in this episode. So Ilana's crying in the statue, and Ben tells her Jacob died in the fire, so she goes over to it and puts some of Jacob's ash in the bag. She also tells Ben that the man in black took Richard because he is recruiting. Before they bury Locke's corpse, Ilana tells Ben that the man in black is stuck in Locke's body and can't change into forms of other people now, which makes you wonder, if the man in black can only transform into Locke, how could he also transformed into Alex beneath the temple? So they bury Locke and Ben does the eulogy, admitting to the others that he murdered him. Okay, now let's talk about what happened this episode with Flock. We go on a Sweet Star Tours ride through the island from the monster's point of view, and I'm sure I'm not the only one hoping for a smoky ride someday at Disneyland. The monster ends up at a tied up Richard, turns back into Flock, and releases him. He wants Richard to come with him. He needs him. Well, this is Valentine's week. He promises to tell Richard everything, but Richard refuses, and right after that, the man in black sees a strange blonde boy whose arms are covered in blood. And I'll talk more about the kid in just a bit, but it's important to note here that the Nemesis seems to know who the kid is. Also, Richard doesn't seem to notice the kid at all. Flock looks startled, but he asks Richard again if he wants to come with him. Richard politely declines. Flock mentions that people seldom get a second chance, and walks away. He ends up going to the barracks, and we can hear Sawyer blasting some music in the background. The actual song in the background is called Search and Destroy by the Stooges. Some of the lyrics in the song that relate to Sawyer and Lost include, "I'm the runaway son of a nuclear bomb. I am the world's forgotten boy, the one who searches, searching to destroy. And somebody's got to save my soul." And a cool fact about the Stooges is that they formed in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is, in Lost canon, the headquarters of the Dharma Initiative, where Gerald and Karen DeGroot started. Sawyer's drunk, and the 2 of them talk for a while, and Sawyer can tell that this Locke isn't the real Locke, but he could care less. Sawyer agrees to go with Locke when he says that he can tell him the reason that he's on the island. As they're walking through the jungle, Flock once again sees the blonde boy, but this time his arms aren't bloodied. The Nemesis is extremely surprised to find out that Sawyer can also see the boy too. So how can Sawyer see the kid but Richard didn't? Well, we know that Sawyer has a past history of seeing things that shouldn't be there, like Kate's horse and Hurley's bird. Kate was surprised to find out that Sawyer could see the horse, and we saw this episode that the Nemesis was shocked to know that he could see the kid as well. Maybe that's because, as we'll find out later on, Sawyer's name is written on the cave wall. The kid runs off, Flock chases him, and falls down. The boy then stands right above him and says, "You know the rules, you can't kill him." Then Flock looks livid and yells, "Don't tell me what I can't do," exactly like the real Locke used to say, as the kid walks away, shaking his head. The big question here is, who or what is the boy? And there seems to be 3 main possibilities here. The first one being that it's just a physical representation of the island itself. The way it acts and talks towards the Nemesis seems more authoritative rather than equality, like we see with Jacob. Assume Jacob to be with the man in black. Maybe this means that the boy is a higher power. As Richard says, everyone answers to someone, and this could be the same entity that appears as Walt to Shannon right before she gets shot. Remember, Walt was speaking in backwards English, it wasn't him. Another idea is that the boy is Jacob, and like I talked about a few recaps ago, maybe the man in black and Jacob were actually brothers, and maybe this is what Jacob looked like when he was younger. I mean, the boy and him have similar facial features. Maybe the man in black recognized him as a figure from his past. The third idea is that the boy could be Aaron, and as we know, Aaron is extremely important to the island. Even though we need some more explanation time-wise, that's another possibility that the boy could be Aaron. Now let's talk about what the boy means by him, saying that you can't kill him. it more than likely is referring to Jacob, and this could mean that Jacob actually isn't dead, but as we know, Jacob told Hurley that he died. Maybe the boy is saying you can't kill him, like you broke the rules, or you're not supposed to kill him. Maybe when Ben stabbed him, that's not actually what killed him, but it's when the man in black pushed him in the fire. That's what did it. Now he has to suffer the consequences, and maybe that's what the boy is actually saying. However, if the young boy is Jacob, maybe he's just simply saying, you can't kill me, like neener neener. Some other ideas is that the him is actually referring to Richard or Sawyer. As we'll see later, Sawyer is a candidate. So what's the difference between the first boy who was bloodied and the second boy who seemed to be real? Well, I think the first boy was an apparition. As we saw, light was shining down on him and then he disappeared right after. I think it could be a nod to Cain and Abel. As we know in the Bible, Abel was killed by Cain and then was marked.